let's go with the Texans. They start off, they're picking number 2. Obviously, that one is going to be a quarterback. What's the ideal scenario for the Texans?
Ideal scenario for my money, for them, 2-12. Pick 2, Bryce Young. I think we've talked a lot about that. If the Panthers don't draft C.J. Stroud at this point, it would be a massive upheaval. I expect C.J. Stroud to go number 1, and then at number 2, you're getting gifted still, even after losing that number 1 overall pick in the craziest Week 18 game. Getting gifted still the best quarterback in the draft for my money. So Bryce Young, and then for him and his skill set, I want to pair him with Quentin Johnston in this draft class. I don't think he's a guy, to me, there's 2 top wide receivers in this class, and then a little bit of a tier, and then 2 more, and then a little bit of a tier. And the top 2 are Quentin Johnston's and Jackson Smith-Njigba. I just don't think Bryce Young, for as good as we say he works the middle of the football field, he's not a work the middle of the football field underneath kind of guy. The shorter quarterbacks, that's still an area of the football field where they will struggle. Not struggle, but just won't attack based off of sight lines. So I think that's a lot where Jackson Smith-Njigba wins, but where Quentin Johnston wins is over the middle of the field on dig routes, on intermediate crossers and those sort of things. And then he presents a big catch radius for a guy like Bryce Young to hit. So I think just giving him weapons, never a bad thing. That, to me, is the ideal scenario if I'm the Houston Texans leaving this first round of the draft.
Yeah, I think the Bryce Young thing is absolutely their best scenario. To me, that would be a little like last year when, Aiden Hutchinson was supposed to be the number 1 overall pick for most of the process. And then all of a sudden, the Jags do what they do and draft a super athlete, and Hutchinson ends up slipping to 2, and the Lions are just like...
Not the Jags. Trent Baalke does what Trent Baalke does.
Yeah. But, all of a sudden, Detroit ends up just getting gifted a guy that they didn't think they were going to have a shot at and run the card in. For Houston to lose control of that number 1 overall pick and still get what you and I think is the best quarterback in this draft, it can't get any better than that. That's as lucky as you're going to get. And then we're on the same page in terms of giving that guy receiving help with number 12. I've gone with Jackson Smith-Njigba just on the basis that, and I think your point is fair, that Johnston is a bigger threat on the outside. I want a guarantee of upgrading that receiving core, with as much of a boost as I can make it. And, I think Jackson Smith-Njigba might be the safest receiver in this draft class. However debatable it is that he can play outside and be a true X receiver, the sort of minimum of what he's going to add is a really good separator on slot stuff, working all 3 levels, to be fair, but from that inside alignment.
Truthfully, I think the PFF Draft Board right now, how it's aligned, I have them 12th overall. And truthfully, that may be too low just based on the value that brings to the table at the NFL.
Right.
There's not as much as we say, slot production, whatever, it's somewhat easier to come by. A lot of guys can do this and that. To that degree, though, to I think the safety with which we know Jackson Smith-Njigba is going to be a good pro, and to which he can really I don't want to say not be guarded on that route tree, but just should be as sure a thing on that route tree as possible. I think that we almost underrate that, because there really aren't that many guys who are slot machines, at the NFL level, that are really that automatic in that regard, and then have a little bit of versatility to them as well. And so I think if you wanted to draft him top 7 in this draft, I don't think that's crazy, just because of the value proposition that wide receivers are what moves the needle for offenses around the NFL. True guys that can get open consistently. So, yeah, I wouldn't, again, argue with either guy there. I do think if wide receiver 1 is available to them at 12, they should take wide receiver 1.
Yeah, he's in that category, or that question again, of pushing because the degree of certainty that he's going to be good, or the degree of confidence everybody has that he's going to be good, that pushes up where you should draft a guy, because other players are dealing with a greater degree of uncertainty, and that even if they have a higher ceiling or that their value is potentially higher, it's riskier, right? So this was the case with Quentin Nelson when he came out. The degree of certainty was so high that you have to say, well, all right, theoretically you don't draft the guard really high, but if you're like 100% certain that guard is going to be a star, now how high can you draft him? And that was, I think, the conversation last year with Kyle Hamilton as well. Like, a safety is not a tremendously valuable position, but we're so confident this guy's going to be good. That changes that dynamic a bit as well. And then Smith and Jigba, now you're talking about slot receivers. And if you're really confident that slot receiver is going to be elite, how high can you push him? And that's before you get to that thing of, what if he can do more than that? Like, what if he can play on the outside and win as an X receiver as well?
Yeah, and I think more succinctly the point I was trying to make is that people look at slot receivers and say, oh, it's less valuable than an outside receiver. Right. And I do agree that it is. But is a slot receiver less valuable than an elite guard? You know, we're saying he can't reach this high end at his position is why we're kind of is why people are knocking him down boards. He can't reach the high end of his position. But I do still think a slot receiver is more impactful than an elite guard, is more impactful than, say, a guy who can reach the pinnacle of impact at safety, you know, at other, maybe, you know, at linebacker, even, like, you're pushing it then, like, would you rather have Cooper Kupp on your roster or would you rather have Fred Warner? Like, that's a real debate. Cooper Kupp's never going to reach Julio Jones levels of impact at wide receiver. But as we saw, you know, like, he can be the focal point of an offense that leads you to a Super Bowl. So I do think that conversation, like, a slot receiver still may be a lot more valuable than other positions that are going to get drafted higher than where Jack Smith-Njigba goes.